It's about that time of the year. OP06 is right around the corner, so we're going to do our Setley meta tier list. Before we get into this tier list, I want to give a huge shout out to Kai. He just dropped a complete OP06 overview on my Patreon with a bunch of deck lists and a matchup chart that I'm going to show y'all for free at the end of this tier list video, so make sure you stay till the end to check that out. And with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right into the tier list. Are we going top to bottom? So first, let's start with S. I'm sure nobody's surprised, or I don't know, maybe some of you are surprised. But we're gonna be looking at for the top of S, we have Sakazuki. If I can find it right here, Sakazuki. So I think Sakazuki is still easily the best deck in the game right now. For those who don't know, this set it just got 8 cost Moria, which honestly I could just stop there. 8 cost Moria is absolutely insane. Like you get to call like what is even the math? Like you get to call like 15 Dawn worth of stuff to your board while also popping like 8 or like 12 costs on your opponent's board. I don't even know. Like the math is just crazy. You get to do like 20 plus down worth of stuff all at once with this new card. It's absolutely insane. Definitely broke this deck. It definitely allows Sakazuki to keep up, even though a lot of other decks got buffed. And it also got a really strong removal spell, Mirakumo. I personally think people undervalue this event right now. I think it's a very strong event, and I think it's an event that's very important to Sakazuki still being a very strong deck right now. If you think Sakazuki's been weakened or if you've been struggling with playing it, it's just likely that you just need to adjust to the deck. The deck has gotten harder than ever to play. There's a lot more decks in the meta compared to last set, and there's also a lot more powerful cards in the meta in general. So you have to develop like new game plans, new like discard plans and all of that in order to combat against them. But trust me, you can combat against them. Sakazuki is just so strong. Other decks got buffed obviously, but Akos Moria and Mirakuma are helping us not even just, I was gonna say they're helping us stand in there, but really they're just helping us still be ahead of like all of them, right? And honestly, I'd say this deck is like pretty much 50-50 to like advantageous to every relevant deck in the meta, and it's like a 50-50 based on skill. Like if you're straight up just better, I think you're just gonna win, to be honest. So that's my opinion on Sakazuki right now. Very strong deck. Next up for S tier, y'all can guess probably, well, I mean it could go either way, but I got Moria. So some people may disagree. They might say Moria should not be an S tier, might be closer to A plus, or that Sakazuki should be the only leader in S tier. But I genuinely do think Moria is an S tier deck. Similar to Sakazuki, Moria also has access to the A-Cost Moria plus Ice Age combo. But the thing this deck does different is it's like Blue Doflamingo done good, right? Like I think we've all kind of seen Blue Doflamingo's strength. Like we're like, oh yeah, this deck is like pretty strong, but it just has like, you know, a little bit of stuff that just makes it kind of trash. But like Black Moria is like max prestige Blue Doflamingo. So imagine Black Prestige, max prestige Blue Doflamingo with access to a bunch of like removal and actual good units to call, like Perona, Hogback, and Absalom. The deck's gonna be crazy. So I think this deck has slightly worse removal than Sakazuki, but the aggro it gets from having that Doflamingo leader skill is very valuable. It actually makes the yellow matchups in particular a lot more doable than Sakazuki. Like you can still beat yellow Sakazuki, but you're gonna have a much easier time as Moria. So that's like a huge incentive for players who are interested in Moria over Sakazuki. The yellow matchup is a huge incentive, and thanks to having access to like the Ice Age Moria combos or like Rebecca Hinaluchi and all of that, Moria also has the ability to gatekeep like random decks you're not expecting in the same way Sakazuki can. So Moria is definitely very strong. I do think it's a S tier deck, and for whatever it's worth, I do think Moria has a better Reiju matchup than Sakazuki, which I know a lot of people been coping Reiju, so do with that what you will, but just keep that in mind. Next up, moving on to A plus, we have Katakuri. This might be controversial to some. I do think some prefer to have Katakuri top of S, or sorry, not top of S, but like in S, and I originally had it in S2, but I think I'm gonna move it down to A plus. Like Katakuri is a pretty solid deck. I do think it's one of the only decks in this list that has a really good shot at beating Sakazuki, but it's just my issue with Katakuri and why I put in A plus instead of S is I feel like it has like its own internal problems this set. Like I don't know if y'all saw the one Japanese game, but like Katakuri has a lot of bricks right now. Like they just have a lot of bricks right now. Like there was a Japanese final, I think it was like a finals or something like that, where a Perona player, the Katakuri player was at like 3 or 4 life. The Perona swing some crazy numbers like 5, 6, 7, blah blah blah, and they somehow just beat Katakuri just like that, because Katakuri also saw like no triggers. But it's just insane. I think it has a lot of internal problems, and I think on top of that, its matchup spread is also worse than Sakazuki and Moria's. I think you're a lot worse into like rogue and random decks. then Sakazuki and Moria. And on top of that, I think you struggle a bit into Moria, and you're not even guaranteed to beat good Sakazuki players in the first place, or like not just good, but like you're not guaranteed to beat Sakazuki players that are like experienced in the matchup. And if your trigger luck isn't up to par, you're probably just gonna lose most of the time, which is why I put it in A+. But I do recognize that it's a very strong deck now. Like, it got two of its strongest cards this set. It got Reject and it got Kikunojo. Reject is insane, right? Like, you get to deal 1 point of damage to your opponent, and on top of that, you get to take your own life, which activates your Amaru. So unlike previous sets where like I'd have to be praying to God, like if my opponent clears my board and they still have 1 life, I'm like praying to God that I hit like a trigger out of life so I can go for lethal. But even if I have no cards on the board, I now have a more consistent lethal because I can use Reject, deal damage to my opponent, then I can go like Amaru, bam, rest their blockers, swing for game. Absolutely insane. So I do think that's really insane. I think Kikunojo is very strong as well. Paraspore was already annoying, right? Because you discard a card, you get to call Paraspore from life. But then when they kill the Paraspore, they get the card back for free. So it's like, what did I discard a card for? But Kikunojo is even worse than Paraspore. It calls itself for free, and when it dies, you gain an extra life. Absolutely insane card. And category also got a bunch of other random good cards. Like we got like Hiyori, which I don't think sees play, but some people will probably play it. Onami, which is really good. You can banish on swing, on curve, and when you trigger out of life, you can pop like a 5 cost or less. And we have like You Should Not Disappear, something like that. Like you get to discard like a counterless card to do like plus 3k counter, which is really good, right? Because that kind of helps with the issue I was just talking about of the deck having a lot of bricks. And on top of that, if you trigger the card while you have like 1 life or less, I believe, yeah, no, I think it's 0 life or less, I don't know, but if you trigger, you get to discard only 1 card from your hand and you get to get a life back. So it did get a lot of solid cards, but I do think it's an A+. But I do think it's definitely a very strong deck that can compete with these 2 decks. I do just think these decks are a little bit more better and skillful, which is why I put them a tier above, essentially. But Katakuri will be the only deck in A. Now we're going to be in A+, now we're going to be moving on to A. The first deck I have here is Yamato. So this might be a little bit controversial. I think most people can agree that Yamato is like an A tier deck, or at least that is probably like only slightly below like these 3 decks. But I do think it is notably worse than Katakuri, Mori, and Sakazuki. I think its main advantage right now is that it's really good against 4 life leaders, which also means it's one of the few decks that can keep up with Sakazuki. Like the same way Katakuri is one of the few decks that can keep up with Sakazuki, Yamato is one of those decks as well. And it's just a very powerful leader skill as well. Like double attack is insane. Like you can just steal games, and you have access to Onami, which allows you to double attack and banish. That means you can get rid of 2 of your opponent's cards. The deck has like a lot of aggressive unit 6 that can rest stuff, and there's actually a lot of different versions of Yamato as well. I don't even know which one's the best myself. In the Patreon article that Kai posted, he actually shows like 4 different versions of Yamato. Like there's really like 20 different versions of this deck. So we're still experimenting to find out what the best is, which means this deck does have a lot of potential, maybe even potential to get up to A+. But at the moment, its matchup spread seems significantly worse than Katakuri, Mori, and Sakazuki. Like, you can like beat Sakazuki, but I do think you struggle into Moria. If you're not playing the ACOS Kid build, I do think you struggle into Katakuri. And I think you'll find that you might also struggle to a lot of random decks that are included in this list as well. But just due to its power against Sakazuki, and Sakazuki likely to be very popular, I do rate it as an A deck. And probably even top of A at that. Next up, Perona. I do think Perona is underrated, I want to say. At least I personally thought it was underrated in Japan. But maybe that was only to a point, right? Because Perona actually saw some results in Japan. Like, I know there's some players who like coped it and they got like flagship results with it. It did have the 1 championship. So maybe I'm capping when I say it's underrated. But definitely don't have this deck under your radar. I think it's a very solid deck. I do think it struggles a bit into Sakazuki. Players are telling me right now that it's a little bit even. I do think that Sakazuki is like clearly like is definitely favored, but you can definitely beat it as a Perona, if that makes sense. Like if you hire as Perona, you see enough Tenkai Zaflamingos, you probably will beat Sakazuki. But you do have to keep in mind that you are going to struggle into Moria and Katakuri, which are 2 of the top 3 best decks, which is why I rate it like a little bit below Yamato, in my opinion. But I do think Perona is still very strong. Like it also has access to ACOS Moria, which is very solid, and being able to like ACOS Moria, your opponent has to deal with that, then being able to lock your opponent out of the game with 10 cost Doflamingo is very, very strong. And its game plan of just being able to just kill whatever your opponent plays in the mid game is also very, very strong. It's a deck you kind of have to play against to really see the power, but definitely don't underestimate it. And then lastly, in A, I have yo, how does this keep vanishing? Hold up, let me get it in. All right, we're back. I don't know how Reiju keeps disappearing from my list, but lastly in A we have Reiju, and Reiju's the deck that has probably the most potential to pop up out of the A decks, but I will say that it lacks like a little bit of consistency. Like it can consistency, like it can do what it wants to do like most of the time, but like the ceiling, is it called ceiling? Yeah, the ceiling of what it can do definitely fluctuates a lot, right? For instance, like some games you can have like a 7,000 unit with rush on turn 2, while other games you just don't, right? Or you have those games where you play Judge, which this is Judge right here, and you can play like all your 2-drops, but some games you just don't see those 2-drops on time and stuff like that. I don't know, its power just fluctuates a lot, but its ceiling's very, very high. Like if Reiju could do what it wants to do every single game, it'll probably be closer to A+, or maybe even top of A+, but that's just not the case right now. And I do think Reiju has a very solid matchup spread actually, but it's like 50-50 into everything. Like, I think Moria is 50-50, though I do think it's slightly Moria favored. I think Sakazuki's 50-50. I do think it's favored into Katakuri, so that's a pretty good benefit, assuming you get your combos off. That's pretty good. I'm unsure about the Yamato and Perona matchup actually. I'm gonna show that in the matchup spread towards the end of the video. But I do think it's definitely worth being in A tier. Like its high roll is just too insane. I think just being able to compete with A+S is enough to also have it in A. I just do have it as in the bottom because I do think it's a little bit less consistent than Yamato and Perona. I do think that these decks will probably perform better on average in tournament, but I definitely would not count Reiju out. Next up, B tier, we have Enel. And man, I don't know, like Enel, it's just a struggle right now. Like Jonas, I think part of me putting this in B instead of A is because Jonas is switching off Enel this set, which I think is a testament to Enel kind of falling off a bit. But I think ACOS Moria is just rough for Enel right now. Like I just think Enel doesn't really have the tools to deal with ACOS Moria at the moment, which means I do believe Enel struggles against both Moria and Sakazuki, which is a huge problem, right? Because those are two of the best decks in the game right now. And I do think it even struggles against A bit. Like I think it struggles against Perona for sure. I think Perona like slaughters Enel, in my opinion. Enel does slaughter Yamato, which is pretty good, but Yamato's not the deck you're trying to counter, right? Like Yamato is the counter deck, so I don't think being good against Yamato's enough. Then from what I recall, Katakuri does also beat Enel on average, so I think it's just in B right now. It did get some cool tools, I will say. Like Hiyori is a very, very solid to have, right? Because now you're able to stack your life as Enel, which is I think Hiyori is like way better in Enel than Katakuri, just because Enel, since you get to be at like 1 life and then you get to get that 1 life back, if that makes sense. Like it's just so insane, right? Because let's say my opponent only has 2 units on the board and their leader, and let's say I use Hiyori and then I like stack Onami on top. My opponent swings with their unit, bam, I pop the other unit with Onami, they just can't go for lethal anymore. Then it gives me the opportunity to heal myself next turn, and then I still have life. Like, so I think like controlling the game with Hiyori and stuff like that is definitely done a lot better than Enel. And I do think it's a fairly solid deck. I just think its matchups just aren't there right now. I think the other decks are just too strong. ACOS Moria is too strong. I don't know, but I think next set with Tenkai's insane for sure. Next up, Uta. So Uta is probably a deck that not many people are looking at, and I do definitely want to rate it in B tier for sure. I think Uta is also decent. I think it has like a lot of even matchups. Like it's kind of weird. Like I think it has the potential to like aggro a bit against Sakazuki and Moria, but I do think Sakazuki and Moria will come out on top more on average. It definitely can beat Katakuri, which is huge. Its Perona and Yamato matchup is currently unknown, but it's definitely a deck that could sneak up there. Like I think it's a deck that people also weren't expecting to win in that one Japanese tournament. I think the Japanese tournament where I forgot what the tournament was for, but it like won like nationals or something in Japan. I think people weren't expecting that. It's definitely a deck that sneaks up. I personally don't think it's that strong right now, but I do think it's a deck that you definitely shouldn't like underlook. And then lastly in B, we have Red Purple All, which I'm actually gonna put at the top of B for the time being. Red Purple All just got crazy tool this set. Like access to like 4 more Gordons is insane. Access to Purple Reiju, which allows Red Purple All to actually have card advantage, is insane. Yeah, I don't even think I have to mention any of the cards. Like, it does have some other nice cards, but just those two cards in general. Reiju gives us card advantage, and having 4 more Gordons helps solve like the problem of like not drawing into debuffs, which is very, very strong. I'm gonna be honest, I do think Red Purple's Law's matchups are a little scuffed right now. Like, if you high roll, you can probably like finesse some games, but I don't think it's a real deck to really take at the moment. I do think it's a little bit better to take than probably like a no, because I think a no is just lacking right now. It's probably a little bit better than Green Utah due to Tyro potential. But really, it's kind of EB01 waiting room. But if you really like Red Purple Law, you can definitely play it right now and get like decent results, I believe. But I don't know. I think the B decks right now are like significantly like a step below the A decks, if that makes sense. And then the gap between A plus, and S is a lot closer. Then for the EB01 waiting room, I'm gonna just chuck them all in there. Purple Luffy. Purple Luffy is also kind of like a question mark to be honest, because I feel like it hasn't really been explored much in 06, but it's just hard to think that it would be that strong in 06 because it was already kind of struggling against Sakazuki last set, and now Sakazuki has access to Moria. So like 7-cost Borsellino was a huge problem for Luffy last set, and now Sakazuki gets to play a unit that big while also being able to still play Lucci and being able to clear your board. So I do think it just seems a little doomed right now. But in EB01, at least it gets like a ramp card and probably some other random purple stuff. But it's definitely in the waiting room for the time being. I also have Red Purple Luffy in the waiting room. Right now, it might be better than I rate it, but I do think it just gets better towards an EB01. And it does also get Bon Clay, which is the same 4-cost ramp card I was talking about with Purple Luffy. And then Red Green Law. I don't know if y'all saw on Twitter, I actually posted a OP07 Red Green Law list. If y'all haven't seen that, definitely check it out. But I do think in EB01, Red Green Law does stand a chance again. I think it still struggles against Sakazuki, but that new 5-cost Cavendish just gives the deck a real chance to shine again. So definitely look out for Red Green Law in EB01. Then lastly for C tier, Whitebeard. I just think Whitebeard just, I just don't think it's that good right now. Maybe I'm underrating it. Maybe it's closer to B, but I'm not really expecting much representation from this deck. I'd be love to be proven wrong, but I'm just not expecting it. Zoro's also in C. Maybe it's closer to EB01 waiting room actually, because Kid and Killer is a very strong card, like that I think makes Zoro like more strong. I do think the guy who went to Worlds, it's a Japanese player. He's a really good, he's like Japan's Zoro player. He took Sakazuki to Worlds, but he did really well with Zoro in a recent tournament thanks to some new cards in EB01 like Kid and Killer. And they also have like their own version of Houndblaze, but for red. So maybe it's EB01 waiting room, but I'm not really expecting much of this deck, whether it's EB01 or not, to be honest. Then lastly, I have Nami. I think Nami's just chopped right now, bro. I think when Sengoku or whatever comes out, I think it's OP07. Nami will get better again, but right now I think it's just a little rough to play. And if it ever got relevant, people just slot in Pudding and the deck is just doomed, bro. Like, Pudding is just such like a low investment tech that also happens to randomly be good into everything. That just like screws over Nami, so I just want to do it. With that being said, this is it for the tier list. Let's go ahead and look up that matchup chart that Kai made. All right, so this is the matchup spread made by Kai here. And as you can see, let's first look at our top 3 decks here, right? So we have Sakazuki, which we say is favored into Moria, even into Katakuri, disadvantageous into Yamato, but really I think it's like 50-50, you know how to play it, to be honest. But favored into No, favored into Perona, and then like 50-50 into Red Purple Law, 50-50 into Raiju. So as I said, like very good matches, but like at the very minimum it's 50-50. And like I know 50-50s are 50-50s, but this is like a good 50-50, bro. Like if you know what you're doing, like this is really like, this is like a good 50-50, like you're probably gonna win type shit. Then we also have Moria, which you can also see very good matches spread as well. So disadvantageous into Sakazuki, which lines up with what we're saying over here. But here it's actually advantageous to Katakuri, whereas like Sakazuki was only like even into, it's actually favored into Yamato as well. As I said, it's a lot better against the yellow decks just because you have access to like the leader skill and being able to swarm the board, where Sakazuki can't really do that. You do have a bad Perona matchup, which kind of sucks, but you also clear Red Purple Law. Then you have an even matchup into Rage, which I personally think is a bit advantageous. I actually plan to do a YouTube video of like showing some games of that matchup so y'all can see it. And then for the third deck, which I actually had an A+, Katakuri, which as I said, very powerful deck, but as you can see, its matchup spread is just a little bit worse than Sakazuki and Moria's, right? Like it struggles a bit against Moria. Even Sakazuki's a 50-50, which I really think is just dependent on Katakuri's trigger luck and the skill of the Sakazuki player. And that was like 50-50, but and that was not real, so whatever. But you beat Yamato. I hear Fortress Yamato, like with ACOS Kid, might be a lot more difficult. So this could actually turn into like disadvantageous or closer to a 50-50 depending on the Yamato variant. And then it is positive into Perona, which is solid as well. Disadvantageous into Red Purple Wall, but again, that's another deck that we're not really going to see too much of in the meta. Then this is 50-50 into Reiju. I was talking to Kai about this. Personally, I don't know. I think a lot of people would agree with this. I do think Reiju is clearly favored into Katakuri in my opinion. But I guess it does come down to what the Reiju player draws, right? Like, it's a 50-50 dependent on how good the Reiju player draws. Like if Reiju draws chopped, then it's chopped. But if Reiju draws like good or honestly even decent, I do think you're beating Katakuri most of the time just because you go wide. Or if you see that early like 4-drop 7K, like, you know, you're cooking. So I just wanted to show the top 3 decks. Y'all can look at the other matchups here. Like, I guess I'll just show y'all one for an example, right? So let's say I had Yamato like a little bit below the other decks. As you can see, its matchup spends a lot more stuff. Like, it has a lot more decks that it's just advantageous to. Or if we look at it now, same thing. It damn near loses to like the whole meta. Perona actually probably has the most solid match fit out of these 3. So maybe I arguably should have put Perona at higher on my tier list, like maybe like top of A. But I was just concerned with how it does into like Sakazuki and Katakuri, to be honest, which is represented here. But maybe it is still worth being like top of A, just because it has like way better matchup than it now. I don't know. I had Yamato at top just because like being very good into Sakazuki, which is the best thing, is really good. But I don't know. It can go either way there. But anyways, I'm rambling. Let's go ahead and debrief the end of this video. Thank you for those who made it to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this tier list helped you out, or you like the content. Please, helps a lot. As y'all can see, I was kind of like coughing a little bit. I'm feeling like, I don't know, I'm just feeling a little bit sick right now. I don't know what it is, but you know, I'll be better soon in time for regionals and stuff like that. But let me know what y'all thoughts are on the tier list. If you guys have any like opinions that were like way different than mine or anything crazy y'all think I said, please let me know in the comments below. With that being said, I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.